Welcome back to Maria. I'm your host, Maria Cardona, here with my co-host, Julio, Ricardo, Varela, and we're thrilled to welcome Sindy Benavides, the Chief Executive Officer of the League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, as you are very well known for, Sindy. Welcome to Maria. Thank you for being here.
Maria, thank you so much for having me, and Julio, so good to see you as well. It's an honor to be with you today.
Sindy, LULAC has been at the forefront of fighting against Latino voter suppression for decades. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in this upcoming, such a critical election to ensure that Latinos are going to be able to vote at the ballot box and have their vote counted.
You know, this election is so critical, and I understand we always hear that this is always the most important year to vote, but truly, 2020 is the most important
Right.
year for all of us to turn out to vote. It's also the
It
very first
is.
year in which Latinos are the largest minority voting bloc. And with 32 million eligible Latinos, it's so important that for those folks who are not yet registered, that we register to vote, but also to remember that it's not enough to register, that we actually have to turn out to vote for it to be counted. You know, as Lula, gosh, we are always involved in every single electoral cycle, and for us, voting is just the premise of having our voices heard. It's really making sure that we hold our elected officials accountable, and that we also vote for candidates who, one, will respect our community and also have an alignment in terms of our value, in terms of that basic respect for our community. And I will tell you, Maria, we're really keeping an eye in terms of disinformation and misinformation, and really sometimes folks don't understand the nuances between those two. But in terms of disinformation, it's really intentional. People using information in an intentional way to mislead individuals, to not go to vote, whether it's giving them the wrong voting day, or spreading rumors that are inaccurate. And so, as informed individuals, we have to really be watchful of what may be happening. As a civil rights organization, we're pressuring tech companies to make sure that they're putting all the rail guards, putting all the protections in place, so that our community, a community of color, Latinos, are not targeted. We already know that there's other ways of voter suppression. What we saw during the midterms is that the example of Dodge City, where the elected
Yes.
officials
Oh,
there
that was
tried to take out
awful.
the only polling location in Dodge City, outside of Dodge City, and put it in a place where it was not accessible for our community, where obviously we would not be able to turn out. And so, we're keeping an eye on that. But we're also looking at cases like what happened in Monroe County and New York, where really the only polling location where we have the highest amount of Latinos, it was changed. And, that's problematic when that polling location is specifically where you have the highest amount of Latinos who are registered to vote. But beyond that, we've filed multiple lawsuits, and we know that we can expect more, right? And people don't understand that voter suppression can look in so many different ways. It can be the long line, it can be information that's incorrect, it can be making sure that we don't have access to early voting or voting by mail, especially during this pandemic.
Cindy, one of the things that struck me with all the work that LULAC has done, and everyone assumes, it's only to the traditional states like California and Texas and Florida, which, that's where it only happens. But when you look at the data, especially in the last 10 years with Pew, the fastest growing states where Latinos are, like, North Dakota, South Dakota, New Hampshire. Can you speak a little bit to those specifics where, LULAC showing up like in the right time?
The honest truth is that Latinos are growing, and we are growing everywhere. So it's not only in the quote unquote traditional states of California, Texas, Florida, New York, Arizona. In fact, you mentioned it. And in North Dakota, specifically from 2014 to 2017, we saw a 32.4 increase in the number of Hispanic eligible voters. North Dakota. We also saw this
Right.
trend happening in states like Oregon and states like North Carolina and states like South Carolina. And the truth is that, one thing that's very distinctive of the Latino community is our dedication to work and how we follow also labor migration. And where you see that growth is in states where there's an increase in demand for work. And there's obviously other factors like affordable housing that are also important to include in here. But overwhelmingly, what we follow is really that work migration, that labor demand, where you see that increase, Julio. And I would say, something interesting about this election as well is that 1 in 10 voters are foreign born. And the pattern that we've
Yeah.
seen, especially from this administration that has attacked our Mexican community, our Muslim community, our Latino community in general,
Mhm.
is that I think those 1 in 10 voters will remember how this administration treated them.
Trump and his administration are very focused on trying to keep Latinos from coming to vote. And one of the outwardly ways that they are doing this is by continuing to talk about the myth of undocumented voting.
The fact is that 0.001%, may inadvertently have casted a vote. And even from the National Association of Secretaries of State, who by the way, are both Republican and Democrat, are saying that they're not aware of any evidence to support these voter fraud claims from President Trump. And so, como diríamos en español, es una mentira. It's a lie. This is a way to really pass on disinformation to the community and to have individuals focus on something that's completely inaccurate, completely untruth. And, you just have to kind of think about this in a very logical way. Why would individuals who do not qualify, who are not eligible, put themselves at risk of not only the heavy penalties that exist when you vote and you're not eligible? Another huge risk is that you can actually be deported. And if you're legally in the country and perhaps, you apply to become a US citizen, this is grounds to deny you citizenship to America.
How do you fight that misinformation? Because anyone who brings it up is accused of being like biased or agenda driven.
Like I say, numbers speak for themselves, right? I mean, like you can't dispute numbers. I mean, like numbers are pretty straightforward. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 does not equal 10. My father taught me that if somebody thinks, like that you're crazy, no matter what you say, they're not going to understand it to be the truth. And all you can do is focus your energies on making sure you actually turn out to vote.
Sindy, we'll be right back with more from you. So stay put, amigos, no se me vayan. This is Maria. Welcome back. You're on Maria. I'm your host, Maria Cardona. I'm here with my co-host, Julio Ricardo Varela, and we're talking to Sindy Benavides, the CEO of LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. Sindy, we're talking about voter suppression, and I know that one of the things that you all do so well, and it's such an important job, is to educate voters so that they know when they go to the polls or when they start the process of registering what their rights are, so that others cannot give them misinformation or disinformation. So, for example, if they go to a precinct and they are asked for an ID and they don't have the right one, they have the right to demand a provisional ballot. So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Maria, this is such an important point when we talk about our rights as voters and really voter awareness. What we know is that oftentimes we don't know our rights. We don't know a lot of information around the electoral system. We've been very fortunate to partner with NALEO, with our good friend Arturo Vargas, in hosting the bilingual hotlines. And, what we have found overwhelmingly is that individuals oftentimes call us the day before or the day of, saying, "Can I register to vote?" And then we have to kind of go through a couple of questions and we find out that they're already registered. They haven't moved, they haven't changed their name, but they're they're under the impression that every single election cycle they have to register to vote. We also know, Maria,
Huh.
that many individuals will show up at their polling precinct, and sometimes in our community we have more than one last name. Key example is my name. My full name
Yes.
is Sindy Marisol Maria Magdalena Benavides Villeda. That did not fit in my social security card, so it was cut down. But
Right.
oftentimes,
Right.
we have two different last names, and the
Yeah.
individual at the precinct will only look under one name and not search the other.
Right.
And so we know that that's problematic, and so we have to understand as voters what our rights are, and we do have the right to ask for a provisional ballot, and not leave the voting location until we've actually casted that provisional ballot. I think the other major one, Maria, and as we talk of voter suppression, it's also understanding that we may encounter long waiting lines, and this is something that we want the different county elected officials to be able to fix. And, it's a shame when you have the same county, the same city experiencing the same problem year after year. It means that they're not really taking the necessary steps to address the issue.
Part of this as well, Cindy, just you talking about it, has to do when you talk about county officials and election officials. A lot of those people are elected. So can you talk about like how you have to have this whole notion of I'm back to the representation that's sort of becoming that's a theme in everything in our community. How is it also running for office? How does that help voter suppression? Because you would think that people that might know the community more, if they get elected, might be a little bit like, okay, this is how voting is a right. We need to serve the people. So what can you say about that?
Julio, that's such a fascinating question. And I just want you to stop and think if, growing up, your mother or father or abuelitos ever told you, like, hijo, when you grow up, I want you to become a politician. I don't think we're actually ever told that, right? Like, I think that's like the farthest thing from our parents' mind. If anything, they're like, do not become a
Hmm.
politician. What we all need to do is to reshift our mindset, unlearn what we have learned through society directly and indirectly, and recognize the power that we have as individuals and as leaders, and intentionally put our names on those ballots because we want to see more Rodriguez's, we want to see more Cardonas, we want to see more Vasquez, more Benavides, more Garcias on those ballots. And I do think that when we have more Latinos running for office, it inspires our community. I mean, I'm still inspired by Julian Castro, right? I mean, like I think he's such a wonderful candidate. And we have so many other wonderful candidates like Senator Catherine Cortez Mastro, Representative Sylvia Garcia, who represent us so well. We need more
Hmm.
individuals like them.
Sindy, as we are looking toward what you are calling the most important election of our lifetime, and it is absolutely true given what we have endured with this incompetent, corrupt president, what can you tell Latino voters that they can do between now and the election?
When it comes to voting, information is power. And so we need to make sure that we push our elected officials, one, to have early voting occur, understanding that the last thing that we want to see is long waiting lines, right? The last thing that we want to see is people congregating and literally putting their lives on the line. And I would say it's, vote by mail is really important. What we saw in Texas is Texas tried to limit by mail to
Right.
individuals over 65. So it was discriminatory. And we want to make sure that all individuals are included and vote by mail, and that it's not only one section of the community. We also want to make sure that folks understand that voter suppression is a real thing and that we need to be vigilant of voter suppression tactics, whether it's misinformation, disinformation that's being spread through social media. And it can look in a number of ways, right? It could be someone saying, ICE is at X polling location location be where. It could be the wrong polling location. It could be the wrong election day. It could be a number of different things. And sometimes, as individuals, we're not aware that something is actually misinformation, and we may ourselves actually spread it. And I want to be realistic. Look, maybe the last thing that we have on our mind is November 3rd, election day, because right now, so many of us are fighting to put food on the table, because so many of us are fighting to find a job to be able to serve our families and our community. And the last thing we're thinking about is voting. But I would say we have to really think about voting like it's a fundamental right, like it's a way to fight back against discrimination, against racism, against words that are used against our community. And I just want to end with this, Maria. I mean, as an immigrant myself, as someone that was brought to this country at the tender age of 1, I remember my mom telling me stories of, her being captured, but she was released with her 2 children. And in 2020, refugees who are coming from Central America, from other countries, are being separated and are being held in cages, even in the middle of a pandemic. And we just have to be cognizant that it is not acceptable, and that if we do anything this year besides the fact of wearing a mask and protecting our families, the number 2 is voting. And whether that is, putting in our calendar to early vote, or making sure we send in that mail-in ballot, or we go in person, making sure we have all the protective gear in place and we're social distancing. It's absolutely something that we have to do.
Sindy, the work that you do at LULAC is so inspirational and so important. Thank you so much for doing it. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today on Maria.
Maria, mil gracias. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so happy to see you and to see Julio, and also acknowledge the work that you do every single day.
Gracias, hermana.